Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Caris May, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Chief Petty Officer Tony Birchall. Today, we remember and commemorate the 72nd anniversary of victory in the Pacific Day. In the afternoon of the 15th of August, 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's acceptance of their Allies' terms of surrender, as outlined in the Potsdam Agreement. It was more than 3.5 years since Japanese troops had invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. News of Japan's surrender produced spontaneous celebrations in public places in Australia, the United States, and war-ravaged Asia and Europe. The Second World War was over. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September, when their delegation signed the documents of surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, marking the official end of the Second World War. The war had spread across the globe, and there had been widespread death and devastation. Over 70 million soldiers and civilians had died as a result. In the Asia-Pacific theatre, Australia suffered over 9,000 fatal casualties, nearly 14,000 wounded, and over 21,000 prisoners of war. The United States suffered over 111,000 fatal casualties, with over 250,000 wounded, and like Australia, over 21,000 prisoners of war. Japan suffered over 1.7 million fatal casualties, 94,000 wounded, and over 41,000 prisoners of war. The alliance between Australia and the United States, which began on the Western Front in the latter stages of the First World War, became even stronger through our shared struggles during the Second World War. Since 1945, Australian military personnel have served alongside their American counterparts during the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, we pay our respects to the 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War, and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We will recall the story of just one today, Corporal William Maxwell of No. 2 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, who was accidentally killed on the 14th of August 1945, the last day of the war. At this evening's ceremony tonight, we are honoured to acknowledge Air Commodore Ian Scott, President of the Remembrance Driveway Committee, Mr Alex McGowan, representing the President of the Naval Association of Australia, Australian Capital Territory Section, and Mr John Kirk, ACT President, Returned Services League of Australia. We welcome all the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from around Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Queensland, St Mary's School, Charleville, and Sacred Heart School, Cunnamulla. From Victoria, Coomida Primary School, and from Western Australia, Byford Secondary College, I apologise. To commence this evening's ceremony, I invite you all stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
We've
the Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Corporal William Joseph Carline Maxwell. William Maxwell was born on the 27th of February 1910 to Albert and Emma Maxwell. The young William Maxwell grew up in Albury and attended local school. In early December 1923, William's father, Albert, contracted pneumonia and was hospitalised. 2 days later, William's mother, Emma, went into labour and was taken to the same hospital, where she gave birth to twin boys. Sadly, Albert's health deteriorated and he died on the 9th of December. After leaving school, Maxwell worked as a wool classer and a mechanic. And in early 1939, he enlisted for service in the militia, but it appears he did not undergo any training or join a unit. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, Maxwell joined the Royal Australian Air Force on the 6th of November 1940. With his experience as a motor mechanic, he was accepted for training as an aircraft engine mechanic. During his training and postings to several operational training units, Maxwell achieved good grades. The only blemish being to an otherwise spotless service record was a reprimand for failing to properly fit an oil cap to a Kitty Hawk fighter plane. Maxwell was promoted to acting corporal in 1943, but briefly relinquished his rank in April 1944 when he was posted to No. 2 Squadron RAAF. He joined No. 2 Squadron at Hughes Field near Darwin in mid-June 1944. It had recently been re-equipped from Bristol Beaufort bombers to the North American B-25 Mitchell bombers and was involved in attacking Japanese airfields and other targets in the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. As the war drew to a close, No. 2 Squadron was ordered to move to a new base near Balikpapan. On the 14th of August 1945, the day before the Japanese surrender ended the Second World War, Maxwell joined the crew of B-25D Mitchell bomber, serial number A4737, captained by Flight Lieutenant Eric White. The aircraft was part of a flight of 4 Mitchells, detailed to travel via Biak and Morotai to Balikpapan. After reaching the New Guinea coastline, the aircraft encountered cloudy conditions and the flight leader took his aircraft below cloud height. During a turn, the flight leader noticed Flight Lieutenant White's aircraft turn away and disappear into a crowd. The aircraft and its crew were not seen again. After the remaining planes reached Biak, emergency procedures were initiated, but extensive air searches were carried out over the following days. No trace of A4737 or its crew were found. Maxwell and his crewmates were initially listed as missing. Later investigation determined that the crew had been killed when the aircraft had crashed at sea. William Maxwell was 35 years old. Today, he and his fellow crew members are commemorated alongside the missing on the Labour Memorial in Papua New Guinea. His name is listed on the roll of honour to my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died as a result of their service during the Second World War. His photograph is displayed by the Pool of Remembrance. This is but one of many stories of service, sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal William Joseph Carline Maxwell, who gave up his life for us, for our freedoms, and for the hope of a better world.
Boys and girls, could you please stand for the ode and last post?
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We would like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today, and we wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.